want to do is put this out on the website so that if someone wants to learn about OC Podcasters and how to actually come to the meetups and things like that, they have something that's, that they can look at or listen to and say, oh, okay, well, this is what they do at the OC Podcasters meetups. And then we're also doing video as well, just to kind of stick it onto the website. Obviously, we won't be doing video every single time, but if we have a special engagement or something like that, then we might ask Jacob here, our videographer, if you'd come by and record for us. So anyhow, I'm Jason Tucker. This is Orange County Podcasters. If you were here for ballroom dancing, it's the wrong night. Sorry about that. Or you're in the wrong room. Exactly. It is actually going on next door. I'd like to thank Leo, who actually helped us out with this room. If you want to go to his website, it's Ballroom Dancing is Back, or ballroomisback.com. We're starting a new location. We're trying a new place. Got some new faces here, which is great. It's always good to see new people at the events. And mainly what we do here is we talk about podcasting, how to podcast, how to podcast, where you can learn about podcasting. You can come to our meetings if you have any questions. We have a question and answer time at the end of our podcast or end of our meetings. And we do quite a bit of stuff. We're trying to get into doing events, which is a big thing for us. And I think that as long as the air conditioning actually turns on, we should be doing pretty good here. If you haven't checked out our website, it's ocpodcasters.com, and also on our meetup at podcasting.meetup.com/2. So, all right, I'm going to put the microphones around the room here, and you guys can just grab a microphone and talk.
My name is Paul. I don't really currently have a podcast. I'm trying to get started in photography as a professional, and I wanted to basically start a how-to photography podcast. I'm sure there are enough already, though one more won't hurt. But I don't have any solid plans to do anything with it yet.
I'm Bob Wright, and I have two podcasts. The first one is called Baseball History Podcast, and I've been doing that one for about 3 years. And I started it just to learn a little bit about podcasting, and then it became so popular I couldn't quit it, and so I just keep on doing it. What I really wanted to get into, though, was a podcast that I started this past May, which is called Food Bank Radio. I work for the food bank here in Orange County, and I wanted to do a podcast that revolves around the food bank. So with that podcast, I interview executive directors of the agencies that use the food bank. I interview volunteers of the food bank, some nutrition people, just anybody that has anything to do with the food bank. So that's been a lot of fun for me. So anyway, I do podcasting for pleasure.
I'm Bill Palmer from iProng Magazine. It's a publication for iPhone, iPod, music, podcasting, new media users, all that good stuff. Our 25th issue is coming out next week. Weezer's on the cover, so that's fun. You want to know how we got here? So it was a red train, a blue train, a green train in the back of a Honda Civic. So at least you didn't put me in the trunk. So.
I'm Ron Plouffe, and I have a family-safe storytelling podcast by the name of Griddle Cakes Radio, where we explore the lost art of audio storytelling. I started in August of 2005, so I just had my 3rd anniversary.
My name is Megan Enlow, and I do a couple of podcasts. One is Podcast Junkie. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I talk about the ones that I think are really good and talk about specific episodes. If you're going to start listening to a podcast, this is the episode you should start with. And then the other show I do is called Mean Mommy's Club, where I get together with my 2 best friends, and we talk about parenting. And our motto is raising responsible adults, because the goal is not to have 25-year-old children living in your home at the end of the process.
I'm Scott Isaacson. We have a podcast that's probably not popular in this area right now, but it's called Boston Sports Coast to Coast. So this is my 2nd meeting with the club. I came to the club because I heard about it and I thought it would be great. And We're putting out our first podcast in 2 weeks, and the website will be going by the end of the month. With thanks to Gregory, who helped us with ideas and everything on how to do it, and that was the reason I came to the club. And these people have been great help and everything for what we're doing, and really happy I'm part of it.
Thanks. I'm Gregory Lemon, and I have the Myth Show and Myth Minute podcast, where I share stories and introduce characters from ancient mythologies from around the world in a family-friendly, safe environment, so I can't get into the gory details of some of the mythologies. And I help, and I have a lot of fun doing that, and also do a little bit of voice acting on the side. Some good news, I recently landed a role in a podcast that's going to be that's already started, but I won't be showing up until mid next year. So, but that was something that happened great this past couple of weeks. So.
Can you share what that podcast is?
Oh, Alien Dice, aliendice.com drama. This woman has been doing an online web comic for about 5 or 6 years, and some of her fans decided to get together and retell the same story from the comic book as an audio radio drama, and I'm the evil alien.
Fitting, so fitting.
Yeah, typical, isn't it?
Casting, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
I know that, Greg. What's your role?
Oh, thank you.
My name is Ryan Boyd, and this is my first time coming to these meetings. I came to learn more about podcasts and how to create them. My idea for one would be for socializing and teens becoming more sociable and learning how to talk to people and be having more friends and stuff. So.
Hi, my name is Cindy Boyd, and I'm new to podcasting. We'll be developing a website fairly soon, and I was up in Canada at a marketing meeting, and they spoke very highly about podcasting, saying that it is the next wave of the big thrill and internet, and so I want to be a part of it. And so I surfed the internet, and this organization came up, and so they accepted me with open arms right away, and so that's why I'm here tonight. And we both come from Chino Hills.
My name is Jessica. I am working on starting a podcast called American Nomads. It's about travel and history of travel in the U.S. and whatever else I feel like. I work in radio, and I work right now for K-Jazz, and I work half the year and I travel the other half. And so just finished up a stint of work, and now I have a couple months off, so hopefully we'll actually make some progress. So.
Hi, my name is Russ Turley, and I do the Fat to Fit Radio podcast. And I have a co-host who is in Calgary, up in Alberta, Canada. And every week we give tips and information about dieting, exercise, weight loss, and so far I lost about 40 pounds. And so we'll hope that this continues. Not quite a pound a show, but getting close. So it's a good time. And I came from Long Beach, and this is a much better location for me than driving all the way down to Aliso Viejo. So.
Hi, I'm Glenn Bennett, and I ran into you guys, I guess, at New Media Expo. And then caught up with you on meetup.com and signed up and came down. I'm all the way from Ventura County. There's nothing going on up there, and the LA one seems to be a little bit in hiatus, I guess is the word. So I decided to come down here. I'm a technology guy. I'm a software engineer, and see the next wave of new media coming. I talked to the Zoom guys, and they're doing the Wi-Fi updated podcast to the car, and video podcasts are starting to show up on the TV. Once that breaks once it breaks away from the iPod, I think it's going to be a huge thing. So I'm also a songwriter, so I have a bunch of recording equipment around. So I decided to start my own podcast, sbhosting.com, which is small business hosting. I'm starting a batch of podcast directories to help people get their podcast out there, kind of specifically targeted, and kind of to filter out, at least tag the Ramblecasts, You know, podcasts are now competing against NPR and those kinds of things. So some of the older podcasts that kind of go on and on and on, sometimes it's a little tough to listen to on a commute. So I want to at least tag those things so people know what they're getting into. Some people love them, and I'm going to have a whole site devoted to Ramblecasts. But if you don't want that, you know, I want a way to filter that out. So also working on improving the feed. Kind of a boring topic, but the RSS feed is not intended for its current use. I know a lot of you guys know about the problem of shows getting out of order and all that stuff for listeners. We're trying to address all those kind of issues, expiring content in the middle, lots of cool stuff that you can do with it, but the technology is pretty boring.
My name is Jacob Morales, and I own a company called Moving Pixel Films. And we do event videography, which is primarily weddings, but we also do documentaries, music videos. Working on a documentary right now. And our website is movingpixelfilms.com. And I also have a podcast that's kind of dormant right now, but it's called This Is Not a Diet at thisisnotadiet.org. And pretty much what that website was, that project was, I got a bunch of friends and family together, and we're spending dedicating a year of our life to documenting our weight loss as a group. And I've seen some other podcasts do that as well. And right now we're at the halfway point. So, and it's been a struggle for me. It's hard, but I don't do a lot of recordings for that. We've done video and audio, and it's more of a multimedia thing because I love, you know, I'm a graphic artist. I'm an artist. I do video. I do songwriting as well, and so we like to pull in all the different elements to create an entertaining product or any entertaining show. So, but this is my first time at a podcasters group, so I'm excited. It's good to see a rich variety of people doing their podcasts. It's pretty neat.
So we went around the room. We learned all about everyone's podcasts and the types of things that they're into. What we're wanting to do with this group is get some speakers here, get some people that are willing to pitch their product. There's a lot of them out there, and they all want to pitch their product to people like us because we're a niche market and we're all together. So what I wanted to do tonight is talk about a little bit of the technology behind podcasting, and if there's any questions and concerns that you had about it, some ways of starting up with a podcast, ways of getting a blog to work as a podcast mechanism, things like that. And we have some people here that are technology savvy. We have some people here that are audio savvy. And I think just by getting all of us together and start talking about some of these things, that we could address some of the beginning concerns of podcasting. So I wanted to go around the room and see what if there's any questions that people had regarding podcasts, or some cool things that you've learned about it that may go over some people's heads, and that's okay. We're here at all different levels of technology, as well as audio equipment and things like that. So I really wanted to see if anyone has something to say.
I have a very specific question. Has anyone used the Marantz 620? The little one, the new one? Okay, I'm just thinking about switching, but I haven't actually seen it used, so, okay.
Is there something special about that particular unit?
It's just smaller. And
It's
for
cute, isn't
backpacking
it?
and stuff. No, well, for backpacking, it's smaller, and it's a little less intimidating than carrying around a larger Marantz and a big microphone.
Is it battery powered or anything like that?
I think, yeah, it should be. I'm sure it must be. The Marantz 660 is the 4 AA's, and I think it's probably 2 AA's.
Oh,
But
okay.
what I'm concerned about is it's a 1/8" jack for the microphone. And the salesman says it's just as good, but yeah. So I was wondering if anyone's interested.
You have a good response for that. Please grab a microphone so we can hear you.
Yeah.
Anyone about that type of jack?
I don't know anything about that type of jack, but I'm using the Zoom H2, and that's also a small one, but you'll have the same microphone issue, or the jack issues with that one too.
That's an 1/8" as well?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And it's been fine for me, but I'm sure that the audiophile people are probably screaming when I talk, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
I use the Zoom H4, but I use the built-in microphone that comes with it. It's the earlier brother to the Zoom H2, but it has the two XLR cable inputs in the back. I've never actually used those connections.
Is that what you're actually using when you're recording your shows as well?
When I record my shows, I use the built-in microphone for the H4 because I don't have microphones aside from that. But the reason I bought the H4 is that if I ever did buy a condenser dynamic, I could then plug it into the H4, and that's why I bought it, because I felt that it had the best expansion capabilities.
Yeah.
Any other questions anyone has, or anything like that, or maybe some new issues that have cropped up, or something like that?
I just wanted to say that I came up with an even lower tech than Greg's little box there.
Oh.
If you have a good-sized walk-in closet and you cram enough clothes into it, it does a great job of deadening all the sound around you. You just tape your copy up on the door, close it, and you got yourself a little sound booth, and it works great.
You can also, I haven't actually done this, but I had to do a tape sync in a very echoey room, and afterwards someone was like, well, you just put a blanket over you and the person you're recording. I was like, yeah, he's the director of major motion pictures, and I'm doing a tape sync for NPR. I'm not going to sit under a blanket with him. But that's another, if it's, another possibility.
All the jokes about coming out of the closet have already occurred.
There you go.
I've been playing around with WordPress for a while, and I was wondering, there's a thing called PodPress, and there's also one called Podcasting, both plugins for. And I was wondering any preference there, or also for people interested, I have an automatic installer script for WordPress, and I'm working on the updater to integrate it with the existing updater script. So if you have multiple, I know a lot of guys have multiple, podcasts on one server, this will automatically install it and put the new. I don't know if you're familiar. Is everybody using WordPress? A lot of people. Yeah. They have the little keys that you need to add in now. This automatically adds random keys in for you.
Wow.
It randomizes the extension to WordPress, so it's not WP-, it's a security thing.
Nice.
I'm trying to add the additional security of having to log into the admin directory as well as the admin panel. And then integrate that with if you're familiar with the updater, you can do like multiple sites at once. If this is all over your head, I'm sorry, but
no.
The other one is I looked at the podcasting. It's kind of a newer plugin. It seems much cleaner than the PodPress, and PodPress is now not compatible with
2.5,
2.6 or 2.62 is not. You have to hack the. And one of the reasons I don't like it is because you have to actually hack the PodPress code to make it work, and then every time you do an update, you have to repatch it. So I was wondering if anybody has input on that.
Well, I think there's a plugin called No Revisions. It turns out the revisioning feature, and that apparently fixes what's broken about PodPress. So it's not, you don't have to hack it, but you do have to install a plugin that basically breaks something.
Okay, thanks. Because on his site, his suggestion to fix it is a hack.
I just recently upgraded my WordPress installations, and I found the hack. It was 2 lines of code. Yeah, I had to dig into the code, but it was pretty easy, and I was able to fix it and upgrade it to 2.6.2, and it worked pretty quickly. So I found it to be pretty easy. But my new best friend is WordPress for Dummies. And so I really enjoyed reading that stuff and trying to understand the code more. Because I want to take my level from just doing the installation of the plugins to actually getting into the code itself. So that's what I'm trying to do.
I've had, I also have that problem with, I use PodPress. I tried the podcasting one. I didn't find it as intuitive as PodPress. It seemed PodPress had just everything in the PodPress admin panel for getting all your tags and everything, your album art ready for iTunes submission. It just makes it so much easier than podcasting. And also, once you do that hack, you add a couple lines of code in there. you actually add it to the PodPress plugin. You don't actually do anything with the WordPress itself. So when you upgrade WordPress,
it doesn't run.
PodPress stays the same, and because I've got now 2.62, the latest one. I've got PodPress 8.8 running on that just fine. It works great. So
Okay.
and if I upgrade, I've upgraded many of my blogs with that, and it works just fine.
No, our last meeting that we had a guy who was asking, why do you even need PodPress or any of these other plugins when, if you're using, for instance, FeedBurner, FeedBurner allows you to, it scans the RSS feed looking for an enclosure tag. If it finds the enclosure tag, then it makes it available so that way, or if it finds just an MP3 in there somewhere, that it will make an enclosure tag for you and then make it work. So I guess it depends. There's like 100 different ways to do the same thing. Which one's the right way? And I guess that's why we get together here and talk about them, because there's many different ways of doing the exact same.
PodPress also does have some additional features. If you store your MP3 files on your same server, it does have some statistic tracking for file downloads. Personally, I use Libsyn, so I use all my statistic tracking through the Libsyn service. So, but I do know that PodPress has more functionality than just the RSS generation.
That's funny because FeedBurner, I use FeedBurner, but I don't use any of those extra features. I just give it the raw feed and have it do the statistics for me, and count subscribers and all that stuff. And I let I'll do my statistics with Google Analytics or whatever, and it counts downloads for the MP3 files. That's fine, but there's a smart feed and the friendly feed. I found that messes more things up than it makes it unusable for a lot of feed readers. So I've turned off all that stuff, and so but it does. You're right. It does. I think even WordPress by itself now, if you just have a link to an MP3, it will put it in an enclosure and it'll show up as an MP as a podcast when you put it into a reader. So
I guess you lose the play button. Maybe.
Yeah, you lose the play button. You just have a link. But that was my fix for 2-3 weeks before I decided, okay, I'm waiting for PodPress to be updated, and he hasn't updated yet. So I did the hack and then went back and took those links out and then put them in the PodPress. So
The other question I have is about a separate feed for your podcast. What's the consensus around having a unique feed? If you have a blog and and not throwing everything into the feed, so you have a podcast only feed.
Well, you should be able to, if you just make all your podcast episodes into a particular category, you can then just give that category feed to FeedBurner or something, or just give out the category feed, and then they would just get the episodes. And then all the blog posts would be in a different category.
Well, what's the consensus? I mean, does people think a separate feed's a good idea, or throw everything in the one feed?
I don't know if there really is a consensus. It's what you want to do. Why don't you have make it on the mic? Well, personally, what I've done is I started off with one website and one podcast. Then I started to have my shows kind of split into two separate categories. So I launched a second site for the shorter shows, and then I kept the original site for the longer shows. And then I didn't want to blog in two places, so I have now a third site for a blog. I'm sorry, it's way overcomplicated, but so I have a blog site if people want to find out news, and then I have the two podcasting sites that just deal with the podcast and the show notes, and so that's how I keep those three apart. But on each of my sites, I have the last 10 links on the RSS feed on each of them, so that they could quickly cross-reference and link to each other.
Yeah, I agree. You said what I was going to say about there not really being a consensus. Personally, I would like to have my site just have podcasts, because when I go to a site and I'm looking for a particular link, I don't want to have to scroll through the last 15 blog posts to find their last actual episode and click on the link I was looking for that was mentioned in the show. But there's a lot of podcasters that want everything together, and there's definitely a need to have that system fixed and made non-tech friendly, because I'm not a real techie, and so I know there's ways of doing this so that the podcast is the only thing that shows up on the front page, but the blog is also still available at the same site. Right now, the only way for me to do it as a non-techie is to essentially have a whole bunch of different WordPress on the same site, and that means having to log in separately. And I've got myself and my 2 friends on the Mean Mommies Club, so I would have at least 4 different installations of WordPress, and I would have to run all of that as being the most technical of the 3 of us. So that's a problem I'm trying to solve too, and I don't have the tech to do it. So if someone knows, throw it out there.
Is that easy to do with separate categories? Because I want to do a separate internal blog on my website. It's completely separate from the podcast. Just a separate specific topic on a different page, but have it be a blog separate, and have those blog posts not show up on the main blog. Is that, I don't remember now who was talking about categories. Is that easy to do
I don't,
for a
not,
non-techie?
yeah, I'm not too sure with, not having it appear on the page. We were talking about whether they would appear in the feed.
Right.
And that's what I was talking about. There might be, I think there are ways to theme,
Right.
podcast, WordPress, so categories appear in different pages, but that's way over my head.
The one way I've gotten around it on my website is that even though in the main column I have the newest post, and you may have to go to a second page to find my most recent show, in the right column I have links to the most recent shows described by episode number 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And so that even if they come visit my page, they can easily see in one of those columns, hey, here's my most recent show, and you can click that and that takes it to the page. But that's not a technical solution, that's just a website layout solution.
Yeah.
And I used the RSS widget on, I used widget sidebars, and it's the RSS widget that comes with the install of WordPress.
What site's it?
Huh?
What site?
On my site, mythshow.com, or you can go to Myth Podcast, that's actually a better example.
One of the things that I wanted to that we haven't really discussed yet regarding this is RSS bloat. You end up with, if you have all your posts and everything all in one thing, the RSS file is huge, especially if you are like me and you have you don't have the excerpt set up and you only have just the entire post. That includes images, that includes all the formatting, everything is in that RSS file.
PDFs.
PDFs, everything shows up in that one file. So the way around that would be to use like categories or something like that, and have it only display just those particular posts within that category, like doing podcasts or something.
Scott pulled up my website, mythpodcast.com, for those who are listening. What I did is I have the main categories, the blogs. I use Twitter. My daily tweets go up there. The news from the site when we were up in Vegas, but then on mythpodcast.com, for those who are listening. What I did is I have the main categories, the blogs. I use Twitter. My daily tweets go up there. The news from the site when we were up in Vegas, but then on the right 2 columns, I have a column especially for my Myth Show and Myth Minute. Those other 2 feeds are generated by my 2 other installs, whereas after I had Myth Podcast, Myth Show, Myth Minute, all cross-linking to each other as separate domain names but related, and my Google ranking went up. As a side benefit, my Google ranking improved greatly after I had Myth Podcast, Myth Show, Myth Minute, all cross-linking to each other as separate domain names but related, and my Google ranking went up better, so that when you type in Myth Podcast, I actually show up on the page now. So that's how I've done it. Is it over-engineered and over-complicated? Possibly, but that's how I've done it.
I forget, in WordPress, is it possible to set in just regular WordPress to set how many posts go into your feed?
Yes.
Yes.
I couldn't remember whether that was.
But the caveat to that is that it cuts out the number of posts that show up in iTunes. So if you have several hundred podcast episodes, it'll cut that out. So you would have to end up, you could do something like what Bill does, where your podcast is, or your RSS feed is hand coded. You could hand code your RSS feed and only give iTunes that hand coded feed. I think you do it as well, right, Ron? So you hand code that RSS feed, and only the things you want to have in there, excluding some formatting and things like that, and have it, only made just for iTunes.
It only takes 5 minutes an episode. Mine's pretty basic. Yours might be more sophisticated.
Not at all.
It's 5 minutes, copy, paste, change a couple links, and check for typos, and that's it.
That's the old school way of doing it. Before we had all these newfangled toys to make things generate and break and.
Yes, you young people, I don't know.
I remember back in 2004.
So is WordPress the one to use
For right now,
for doing the
yes,
websites
but
and stuff?
there's other content management systems like Drupal that are starting to become more and more popular, and they're adding these plugins to allow for this.
Yeah, it's just because of all the code that you have to deal with and try to look at and all that kind of stuff. Like for me, with Greg helped me a great deal, but it was like I looked at it and it was like I don't know what it is. I'm new to building websites or whatever, so I had no idea. So,
If you think installing WordPress is complicated, try installing Joomla or Drupal or Joomla are a lot more complicated to install than WordPress is. So yeah.
Well, that's the big thing, is that you have a difference between content management system and blogging system. It's made to be a blog. That's what WordPress is made for. It can be used as a content management system. Actually, I've used it as that on several of my sites that I've done, and it works fine. At some point, I don't even have some of those sites, I don't even have the blogging portion turned on. I just use it just as for pages. And when I build a website and I want to build it quickly and easily, I know WordPress inside and out. I install it, turn off all of the blogging features of it, and just use it for the pages. So there's many ways of using that tool, especially for if you want to do combinations of these things. You can not use the RSS feed built into WordPress, or use it just for your blog. Tell WordPress, hey, or tell iTunes, hey, here's my RSS feed that I hand coded, which some of these people in this room do this, and that's the way to do it. So many ways of going about the same result. So that's why we're going around the room here and figuring out what is it that people use.
I think it's also kind of funny to see how when people come into podcasting, they find what works for them and they stick with it, even because I know I haven't changed how I podcast for 2 years, because when I got into it, that's how it is, and it works, and I don't want to break it. If and when I launch a new podcast, would I do something differently? Most likely I would, having learned from everybody here and from my own experiences. But for right now, I don't want to break what I got.
Well, that's the added benefit of doing the hard-coded RSS feed, is that your WordPress could die, it could break, the database could get corrupt, whatever, and it still works. The bad part about it is you have to manually go in and actually make all the changes to it. So you have pros and cons there, and it just depends on the way you want to go about doing things. But I think you have a good point there, that once you come up with a way, you don't want to break it, you don't want to lose subscribers, you don't want to have your feed down or something like that, and I have the same problem. I don't even want to upgrade my WordPress sometimes. I'm just like, I don't know if this is going to break it. And I've had this problem happen. I've made a change to a plugin that directly affects my RSS feed. And it had one little line of code, because the programmer's not getting paid for it. He's just an open source guy that just writes some code. And he misses one little bracket or one little something, throws the whole code out of whack, and my RSS feed's dead. And I don't listen to my own show, so I don't even know my RSS feed's broke.
Just a comment about.
Sure.
Just to speak as a hosting guy and a software guy, one of the reasons, if you find something that works, do stick with it, because these packages like WordPress, the language they're written in is pretty kludgy. The software is pretty kludgy. So that the plugins sometimes have to jump around a few hoops to get to do what they want to do. So they have to break the rules in order to get things done, because it's kind of the wild, wild west. So a lot of times don't go plug in crazy either, because when you upgrade your WordPress, you might break something inadvertently that you might not even realize for a long time, because they don't follow. I mean, there are no rules, so they're not following the rules. So sometimes they actually go in and change the WordPress code a little bit, or do something that's undocumented. And so if you find something that works, do stick with it, and don't follow these updates all the time unless it's a security thing. You know, there's a guy who has the actual WordPress podcast, and I should talk to him at the new media show, because he's always saying upgrade, upgrade, upgrade. I'm saying no. Because it just breaks too many things, and even now themes are dependent on plugins. So you have these are called software dependencies. You do an upgrade, you don't know where it broke. I mean, it could be in the theme. You have to contact all these authors and figure it out. So, you know, if you find what works and you think it's secure, and that's a huge problem. Like he says, he's getting on the first page of Google. As soon as you get above the radar, you're gonna get attacked. You're gonna get attacked. So be ready for it. Be as secure as you could possibly be.
I think we need a WordPress speaker.
I think so too. Well, luckily some of these people live in the area, and we're actually working on getting some of the authors of these things to either come in or come in via Skype. We could just have them sitting in a box in the corner of the room, so that'd be cool.
What do you see me if I get attacked?
You wanna?
You'll be, once you get above the radar, which means if you appear on any search engine, which is kind of your goal, then there's automatic crawlers out there that say, okay, this website, now I know this website exists. So they're going to try to exploit it, which means they're going to try to get into your database. They're going to try to change the password for your admin account. They're going to try to put posts into your blog. They're going to try to change your theme so that it has, like he was saying, his one website refers to another. So if they can go into your website and put a link to their website, then they're going to get higher ratings. They're going to try to spam your users. They're going to try to grab your email addresses. And this is all automated. You'll get more hits from this than anything else. So you just, and you know, as I say, this software is pretty much, you know, just above the level of crap. So it's not written to be secure. So they're just in a panic trying to keep up with these guys. They didn't write it with security in mind, like he was saying. It's just open source stuff. Guy sits down in his living room, says, "Hey, I'm going to contribute something to open source." Bang, there it is. And if he's breaking your feed, you know he's breaking your site.
Okay, yeah, because last week when we were going through everything, I have a business site and my wife has another site, and it's run by this lady in Arkansas or something, but she runs everything. All of a sudden we got an email from her, and the site I'm using right now, she just kind of did it real quick and hooked it up with the other ones. We got like a, what do you call it, the service denial attack type thing.
Right, denial service attack, yeah.
All of a sudden she's like, hers, my wife does this rat and mouse club thing. It's like this huge, forums, the whole 9 yards. It's kind of idiotic, but you know, but these people who own mice and rats. All of a sudden everything was shut down for 2 hours. And it was because of my site. And I'm like, how is this possible? We just did this. Like 3 of us knew the site, knew the URL, that was it. And then all of a sudden everything shut down. And she said that my site got 5 times as many hits as their site. And they have over 1,000 people a day hitting their site. So is that what you're kind of talking about?
That's exactly what I'm talking about, yeah.
Yeah, there's kind of unwritten rules and ways of setting up WordPress so you won't have those issues.
Yeah.
Nothing is secure.
Okay.
Nothing is secure. You know, for all the windows that you have in your house, one of them can be broken.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's-
Don't mistake the window for a wall. That's
Yeah, it was
definitely
just funny
the
that you
thing.
mentioned that, because that's what happened to me, so it's like, I guess she fixed it, because everything's okay. She said she put some kind of code in or something, yeah, but.
In most recent, in one of the, it was like 2 or 3 versions or subversions back in WordPress, they had this major issue, and people were injecting code into the database. They weren't even touching WordPress. They found one little hole in it, and they just started pushing data into the database. And you'd end up with all these posts, and the way you could tell is you could look into your WordPress and see the number, the actual ID number of your post. And if you're, if you only have like maybe 10 or 15 posts in there, and your next post is 9,600 and something, oh. And then you start looking back in your old posts and you see all of this Viagra and all this stuff that's listed in there. And that's the way that they got around it, is they found one little hole and they injected it in there. They didn't even have to know your password. They didn't even care what your password was. They actually left the site alone, totally alone, and they just found one little security flaw. And people love to find the security flaws. They find it and then they push it out there. And then the lonely guy that didn't upgrade his WordPress is hosed. He's stuck. He's going to end up with, and you ended up having to reinstall the entire WordPress, start from scratch, pull in all of your old postings, and really do a lot of manual work in order to get that to work right.
Yeah. So do we have any podcast-related questions?
What about audio? Does anyone want to talk about audio, like the equipment that you use, for recording, or maybe the software that you use, or something like that? I'll start out by saying I use GarageBand for a couple of my shows. And just like we were talking, once you find something that works, you stick with it. That even goes for particular shows. One show I use this one setup and I have everything templated out exactly the way I want it. And then another show I was like, oh, look at this new program, this is great. And I started testing the program, and I really like the program, but I don't have enough, I don't feel confident enough to move my other shows into this new thing, because I'm thinking that the sound's going to be different, something's not going to be right, and I'm going to have problems with it. So I use GarageBand, and I also use a program, Ubercaster. And Ubercaster is a guy in Germany who writes a program, a great little app, and it does pretty much everything that GarageBand does, with an added feature that it allows you to automate some of the things within your podcast. So you could say, for instance, that I want to play my intro at the beginning of it. So as soon as I hit record, instantly my intro starts playing. 30 seconds into it, it's going to down the intro, and it's going to light up my mics and allow me to talk. And then it's going to stop the music that's playing as a bed under my podcast, and then slowly make that go away. And then at the end of it, it'll bring up the audio for my outro and then play an ad or something like that. And it's all scriptable, and it's all built in really nice and easy to do.
Do you know the domain?
It's ubercaster.com.
What does Levelator do?
It's kind of like an equalizer and gate, and
it's a smart compressor. Yeah, it's a smart compressor. So it will actually go through and look ahead, and it definitely makes the louder things a little smaller and the softer things a little louder. It does a really good job for spoken word type things. You wouldn't want to use it for music, but it's very good for spoken word.
Crap in, crap out.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's a black box.
Yeah, and then the other thing to know about Levelator is to make sure that it only brings in uncompressed files like WAV, as opposed to MP3. So if you record your show in MP3, which is a compressed format, you're going to have to uncompress it to WAV, run it through Levelator, and then recompress it, which is not good for anybody. So I recommend that if you're going to use Levelator, record in an uncompressed format first.
So we have Audacity. What else is there that people use for recording audio or editing their audio?
I use Adobe Audition, which is kind of an expensive program, but it does a whole lot more than what I need. I use it in a very basic way, but I've just gotten very comfortable with it, and I like it. It's pretty easy to move stuff around on it. I'm not doing my stuff live. I record the show, and I've got different clips in there for the intro and outro and music and all that, and I just move those around to fit the part that I've recorded for that particular show. And I've just gotten it down where I can do a show very quickly, just because I can move stuff around so quickly. And that's been my goal for a long time, is to make the editing as quick as possible, if that's what I need. And speaking of Levelator, most of the time you can't tell if somebody is using it. It's only if, well, I'll use one show that I know he must be using it, and that's the M show, where his wife is sitting in the same room with him, but she's not on mic, but she'll talk. And for a while he was using Levelator, and you could tell because you would just get a lot of, well, I don't know, static or what it is? Noise,
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
Yeah, like I said, a compressor makes soft things louder and louder things softer to level the sound. And if there's like noise in the background, you'll make that louder. You will. If there's someone in the distance talking, you will make them louder, but you'll also bring up the overall noise around them. If the lovely Corinne from the M show is like, you know, cooking or baking cookies, you'll start to hear the tin pans and things like that as she's talking.
But recently she started coming on mic, I think, and so a lot of that's gone away. When I was just doing my baseball show, it was just me recording. I had no need for Levelator, but now that I'm doing a show where I have a co-host and I have a guest, I use it a lot because I'll try to get all the sound levels the same, but it just never comes out that way. You try, especially somebody who's not used to talking into a microphone, they'll start talking like this, and they'll start moving away from it and back to it, and it just really changes a lot of the stuff on it. So I think it's a great program, and
how much does it cost?
Yeah, $0. And it just, it is so easy to use. The only problem I had with it the first time I used it is I kept looking for some way to open the thing. It's like, wait a minute.
There's no interface.
There's nothing to open. And then I finally figured out, oh, you just drag the file over to the top of it and it does everything. And when it's done, it's got a whole new file in your folder for you. It is so incredibly easy. I can't imagine not being able to use it, or not using it when you really need to use it.
Another use of Levelator, actually, IT Networks uses it in their automation process. So, you know, they have a different person doing the intro than does the show, and they have like little snippets recorded of, you know, the introduction and who's going to be on the show and what the topic's going to be and the number and all this stuff, and then they have an automation process that just pulls all this stuff together. And if you didn't have Levelator, it wouldn't be so seamless. A good thing to use Levelator for is to record bits and pieces, so you don't have to like record the intro to your show every time, or if you have a spot that you're going to do, you don't have to record every time. Then you can make it all the same level, so it's not obvious that a new piece of audio is coming in. The other thing you can use is something called SOAP to get rid of some of that background noise. It learns about noise. You kind of teach it. You give it a little section of noise, and it says, "Oh, that's noise," and so it goes through the file and eliminates the noise. If you try to use that before you use Levelator, and sometimes after, then you get, you know, a little bit cleaner sound. So sound soap.
And if I remember correctly, that one actually works as a plugin too for, it's like a VST plugin or something like that.
Yeah, it's a standalone and a plugin, and yeah.
And it's for Mac, PC, everything?
I think anything that you can use VST now.
Yeah.
I know it runs on Windows.
Yeah, and I've used on Mac, so it's definitely Mac and Windows.
And a version of it also comes free with a lot of audio hardware. So to look at what you're buying, you might get a free copy.
Of the downgrade.
Right.
Yeah, but you know, it's free.
Dial soap.
Yeah.
I know it's under $100.
Yeah.
I definitely know that.
And I think the other thing to remember is that these tools are to fix things. So if you can record it without it needing fixing, that is really the best way to do it. With Sound Soap, it's really good, but you can tell when people are using Sound Soap if they're trying to overdo it. It's kind of got this squishy sound to it. You know,
It has that Star Wars effect, you know, like you're.
It does.
It's kind of
Yeah.
weird.
You're talking through a phaser or
Right.
something.
Exactly. That's it.
Yeah.
Sound Soap, I've used that, and it will clean it pretty well. But the higher you go in those settings, the more it creates that space sound too.
And it's environmental noise. So you could hit record and walk out of the room, and come back in, and that's the environment's noise. But you're also part of the environment as well. So you're breathing, the cat across the street making noise, the little chirps in the background, all those different things. You know.
Crickets.
Dogs behind the curtains.
you moving the clothing in your closet when you're recording, you know, things like that. All those get recorded, so that's definitely. And yeah, like I said, I'm kind of off mic, crap in, crap out, and that's exactly what it is. I recorded crap and I tried to clean it using any of these programs, and it just made it worse. And the worst thing about any of these things is that you put your heart and soul into that recording, and then take 2 is never the same as take 1. And my wife could tell you that, because I've had to record 3 times for one episode, and she's like, you know what, I don't think we really need to put out an episode today. And I'm like, okay, I agree. We'll come back to it tomorrow. Because yeah, I mean, you have those issues, and you know, one of the things that Greg was saying is, you know, you got to save often. You got to save. And actually, that Ubercaster software I was talking about, it saves on the fly. It's constantly saving for you. And there's programs out there that do this as well, but this one in particular I really like because it does save, and it's constantly saving those files out.
The other thing I think that you need to think about when you're putting together a show is that, like, background noise may be part of your show. You know, it's the environment. If you're doing a show with teens, do it in a teen environment. It's going to be noisy, but as long as it doesn't distract from the show. I listen to a show called Marketing Over Coffee, and it's 2 guys that show up at a Dunkin' Donuts in Natick, Massachusetts. They sit down, and you can hear the coffee grinder in the background and people coming in and out, and but it doesn't distract. I mean, that's their show. They're marketing over coffee, so you're hearing coffee sounds, and at the same time, it doesn't distract. So as long as the background noise doesn't distract, there's one noise that you really can't get rid of, and that's clipping. Just don't overmodulate, and you'll hear it. It hurts. It's a painful sound, and so just make sure that you never clip. Keep your levels down. Test the loudest you're ever going to talk, and make sure that you never clip and hit that red. That is something that nothing's going to be able to fix. Nothing cheap is going to be able to fix that. So other than that, background noise can be normal.
I just don't know. Maybe it's a personal pet peeve, but I've heard it from a lot of people. Don't ever eat and podcast at the same time.
You can't fix that either.
You can't fix that either. Yeah. You know, it is not cute to slurp your coffee during your marketing over coffee. I don't listen to that one, so I'm not attacking them. I don't know if they do that, but you have to remember, this is not table manners from across a table that you're hearing. You're in somebody's ears. You're right there. And anything that you would not do, walk up to somebody right in their ears and don't do it into your microphone.
Well, it depends. If you're looking for an interaction with your listeners via like a comment in your blog or something like that, then you would want some type of mechanism of capturing their comment and then displaying it on the site. If your goal isn't to show the people,
for someone like me that is completely new to podcasting, I'm looking to interface it with Dreamweaver or FrontPage. What software would be a good software besides? I mean, WordPress is what you're going to recommend. Would that be?
Well, it depends. If you're looking for an interaction with your listeners via like a comment in your blog or something like that, then you would want some type of mechanism of capturing their comment and then displaying it on the site. If your goal isn't to show the people that are using your podcast or going onto your website any of the comments, then there's no reason to have that mechanism. Have your email address or some way of allowing them to contact you. Then you're getting that feedback that you'd want. So it really depends on what you're wanting to do here. WordPress, we've kind of shoehorned podcasting into WordPress. WordPress was not intended as a podcasting tool. It wasn't. Obviously because of the fact that we're using a plugin to actually make this thing work, or various plugins. So for Dreamweaver, for instance, if you want to use Dreamweaver or FrontPage or something like that, come up with a great looking website. Look at some of the older tutorials on how to make an RSS feed. Write your own RSS feed out. You can even go to somebody else's website and just click on their RSS feed, have it display on the site, depending on your web browser, and look at that RSS feed, copy and paste, and start playing with it and see how it looks. That could be a way of taking a static website and your podcast and trying to get those two to work together. There's probably ways of getting Dreamweaver, to connect to a database and have it display a simple blog or something like that. Just depends on what your experience is with the tools that you have available to you.
One thing is, if I personally use the Libsyn for my MP3 hosting, and a feature that they have is they can actually create the RSS feed for you. So if you're using Dreamweaver or FrontPage for your website, you could just link to the RSS feed that Libsyn creates, and that way it is completely separate. And Libsyn takes care of your hosting, your RSS feed, all of the posts, the show notes, the tags and whatnot, and then you're on your page, you say click here to subscribe or click here to get my RSS feed, and it sends it over to Libsyn.
And then the only thing you want to worry about that is that if you ever wanted to move that feed, you have a problem in the future. So you're going to be married to it.
Well, I have a very complicated way to get around that.
Of course. Come on, Greg.
How I've done it is I have my PodPress feed that gets pointed into FeedBurner. Then I have a domain name, a subdomain that I have that points over to FeedBurner back to WordPress.
Wow.
And so yes, it's overcomplicated. You're right. But see, what happens is not only if Libsyn goes away, I can move my files, and my subdomain and FeedBurner are safe. If FeedBurner, now that they're purchased by Google, it's less likely, but if FeedBurner goes away, I control the subdomain that I can point directly to PodPress, I can point over to Libsyn, and yes, it's complicated and over-engineered, but it has 3 or 4 points of redundancy so that I control my subscriber base.
But that could be under-engineered as well. There's a little snippet of code that you could slap into a file that says /feed, send it over to FeedBurner, or send it over to PodPress. Little small piece of code. And if that's all you wanted to do is that, then you could just do that as well. So there's a couple ways of doing it.
Get that set up before you get that feed out.
It stinks that you have to make some really tough decisions up front.
Right.
But that decision is going to be the one that's, and I've seen people that are like, I'm stuck. I don't own my feed. Is the whole term is owning your feed. You want to own your feed. I bet you if you went in Google and just type in podcast own my feed, somebody will come up with something. If they don't, I'm going to write it and put it on there, and it'll pop up on my site.
I just wanted to let you know, I have a complicated way to solve the problem too, but I only have to do it once. And as long as nothing breaks, and so far nothing is broken, and I don't see any reason it should, I don't have to deal with it. I just go in and post my files. I don't have to think about it once it was done. Now, it was a pain in the neck to do, and it was at the very tippy end of my tech abilities, and now I don't have to think about it. So once it's done, it's not something you'll have to deal with ongoing.
I'm one of those that does not own my feed. Mine is Libsyn, and I'm not a techie person, And when I set it up, gosh, pretty close to 3 years ago, that was a very easy way for me to do it. I did it, and in some ways I'm not sorry I did it, because that was what I could do. When I started my new podcast with the food bank, I worked with some people here, like Ron, and the IT guy at our organization, and made sure that we had it set up correctly. And I really thank Ron for being an interpreter for me with my IT guy, because I couldn't talk to him. I would frustrate him when I would talk to him, but Ron could talk between us, and it was really great. But, I learned that from being here with these people, that was what I wanted to do. I just didn't know how to do it, and it was great to have some people that could, or a person that could help me do that.
And the food bank's actually a good example of not using WordPress. They're not using WordPress. I'm not sure what content management system you're using, or even if it's something that they wrote themselves or what have you, but it's not using WordPress, or it's using something very, very simplified.
And I think another option, if you wanted to go away from WordPress, is that there are programs you can buy that will code your RSS feed for. I think one's called Feed for All.
And that's the one I've been using for 3 years.
Yeah, you just put your information in, and it generates the actual file that you put up on your website, and you don't have to actually go into the code and
What's the
learn,
cost for Feed for All?
learn the lingo.
$29, something like that.
And that's a standalone on your computer that
Yep,
does
standalone, just kind of fill in the tabs, hit save, and it creates a little XML file, and that's it, it's done.
It was cheap enough the food bank bought it.
Is that right?
To get a little non-technical for a moment, one of the reasons you need to jump through all these hoops is something called your net identity. Is some people now refer to it as your domain name, but you want to establish this net identity, and your net identity does not end or start with Google. It does not end or start with MySpace. It does not end or start with FeedBurner. You have to have your own identity, and then you want to jump through as many hoops as technically necessary at the moment to keep your identity and to keep control of your domain name is part of your identity, and that's your address in the internet world. And you want to kind of hang on to that and keep control of that, because you can move that anywhere. That's like a universal P.O. box or whatever. You can take that with you wherever you go, and all your stuff can follow. If you start anchoring your stuff here or there, FeedBurner or Libsyn or MySpace or whatever, then whatever happens to them is whatever happens to them. I mean, I'm old enough to know about GeoCities and MP3.com and all the ones who died and left people out in the. So that's a big topic for this discussion. But you might want to look at Meetup.com or something and find some people talking about your net identity. And the other thing is, I would suggest is to start off your show before you do any of this stuff, and just before you have an intro, before you have an idea of what the name's going to be, anything, do 5 test episodes and figure out where the heck you're going. When you get to your 5th episode, you say, "Wow, man, I thought I was going to do a health thing, but really I need to do a vitamin thing or something else." You kind of figure out which direction you're going. Another thing, kind of just a completely non-technical thing about the future of what I call now new media, is your website is going to become less and less important. There's lots of people like me. I'm what's called non-scopable. I have targets all over me for people who want to target me to sell me shit, and you can't get me in a scope. You can't. I don't watch TV ads. I don't listen to radio ads. I don't go to websites with ads on them. So you can't get me. You can't scope me. And I want to get everybody, unscopable, And that's one of the reasons for the directory. That's why I'm interested in new media, is because this stuff, lots of people spend their time on Google Reader, and all they're doing is reading feeds. They're just finding the articles that they need, reading those feeds. And there's a lot of people listening to podcasts, so they're not listening to radio. Very shortly, you'll be able to do the same thing on the television. You'll be watching this on your television instead of, watching, whatever else. And even now with TiVo and all those things, it's time-shifted content. So, you're skipping through all the ads. And I think the future is time-shifted content, And so it's really important to have your net identity, but I mean, all this content that people are generating is what is going to be the future of, I don't even want to call it entertainment, because it can be anything you want it to be. It can be entertainment, it can be educational, it can be spiritual, it can be anything you want it to be. You start to tailor your own information, and you unscopable. Nobody can target you. And that's kind of my goal with this whole thing. For me, is to get myself unscopable and get the rest of the world in the same way. So if they're not listening to the radio, they're not watching TV, they're watching what they want to watch, they've selected what they want to watch, and they're reading from the web. This guy's after me. So I think I don't know about all of you guys, but I think a lot of people are just sitting on Google Reader, and by the time they're done there, they're done with the web pretty much. So I think that's kind of the future. So your kind of identity on the web is kind of important, and then you want to, realize that the core thing is not your website. It's your, again, everybody says content is king, but actually I say now value is king. It's not even content. That content has to have value, or an application or whatever else. You have to be delivering value to people. That's the key. Totally non-technical for a minute.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that, and I think that's the uniqueness of, we're going to start seeing a lot of people's gifts coming out, because it becomes a pretty even platform, for everybody that wants to get out there, and everybody has a niche. Everybody has something to offer. That's the beauty of this whole thing, is because I think that's what's going to unfold. I was recently up north, and one of a couple that I was staying with, she had gone to China and broke her hip in China, and she had to have surgery there. And this was about 5 years ago. Well, they did no post-op care for her. And here she is saying, oh, my low back is bothering me. And I come from the natural field, and so I said, oh, well, let's see what we can do with that. And about 10 to 15 minutes, she was out of pain. And it was something that maybe I think that they should have showed her, and they didn't show her. And it was just a few little exercises, something that her and her husband can do together. And if I would have had a camera sitting there right on us while we were doing it, I think it would have gotten a lot of hits for people dealing with pain, and they just want to get out of it really quick, and they don't know how. And she had no awareness on how to do that. Absolutely none. She says, what does this have possibly to do with my low back? And I said, just everything. And you do a certain test and find out that there's no movement there, and put her on her side, did a few things, and she was fine. She got up, did the motion that she couldn't do, and said, wow, I don't have any pain. So to get that out to a lot of people, to me, that would be a good thing. That would be something valuable.
That sounds good.
Yeah. And so that's kind of what we're all about, is about giving simple little things. My kids play sports, and everybody always knows that we're around, and so they'll come over and they'll say, hey, she just sprained her ankle. We just get them right back on the field. Or, hey, they just did this. Oh, can you help them? They're having a little problem with this. Sure, not a problem. Do a few things, and they're back on the field. They're just simple little things that you do. And for whatever reason, the Western medicine is not doing that right now. Whether it's in their physical therapy department, or I don't know what it is, but they're falling short of well-being. They're just saying, okay, it moves, you're done. It's like, no, there's quality of movement, and that's where we come in. And I think that's going to be more our niche, is just quality, rather than just surviving.
I think by using examples like you're using is a good way of getting that's the content. That's the content that you should be, generating. Is
I also hear something else. I hear passion.
Yes.
Yeah, there's
Right?
a lot. Yeah.
No, I hear
yeah.
passion, and
Yeah.
that comes through, and that's going to come through in anything you record. You're going to have to record with that passion.
Right.
One of the things is that when with audio, it kind of diminishes the passion. So if you think that you're talking up, you're probably not talking up enough.
The laptop has a ringtone. That's awesome.
We're gonna break for commercial break now.
I'm trying to do the notes for tonight's, and I'm linking to things like, I think that was Levelator or one of the things that we were talking about earlier. Sorry about that.
Tell Doug not to put those on his site.
Yeah.
Violated 17 copyright.
But speak with passion, and it'll come through, and you'll connect with your listeners.
Yeah, and then we just have like a, whatever, I mean, even my business partner, she was on the phone today, and someone wants to gain weight, and it's like, she's using a supplement that's not gonna support her, and it's like, no, you wanna do this one, and these are the little problems with it, but it will eventually work. And she just spent like 5 minutes on the phone with her, and I said, that's the kind of stuff that we need to have, these little tidbits for people on getting their health up, pulling it up to another level.
Scopable.
And
I've got these targets, and everybody's
Right.
trying to scope me and sell me stuff. And
so, okay, so I could see how that could be avoided for your everyday podcaster or blogger, but what about people like me, or maybe it sounds like you, that have businesses, and that's one of our objectives, right?
I don't mind, stuff that's highly related. Like if I'm listening to her podcast, and somebody has something that's going to be really related to what I want, and they're not trying to trick me into it.
Right.
They're not trying to brainwash me. They're saying, I'm coming to them rather than them shooting at me.
Right.
I don't mind that. I think big businesses are starting to get that concept too. They're starting to get into, but I think a lot of them, I think that why sites like MySpace are going to go down and why Facebook is going to go down is because now the big marketers are saying, the word is out, go to Facebook and, target your market,
Right.
And as soon as the shooters are there, the target's going to leave, the deer are going to scatter somewhere else. So, as long as you're, the new word now is transparent. As long as you're completely transparent, I know that it's a section, it's an ad, and you're telling me the truth, and I'm hearing maybe from the commentator the positives and the negatives, then, by all means. And the other thing is that the person doing the podcast, the person providing the information, as long as they're providing me value, I don't mind them saying, if you want more value, you're going to have to pay for it. If you're doing, if you want to go to her as and I want her to manipulate my back or do one of these things, I would expect to pay for that.
Right.
But ahead of time, I know that she's providing me value for free, and I'm connecting with her. So that's, I think, the new kind of marketing, which is not so much, scope out your target market and, go after them in a broad sense and trick them into.
Like a lot of the viral marketing stuff we see.
Yeah,
I mean, a lot of it's hidden, and the coercing you through the back door,
A lot of people are trying to, create viral stuff that's, but like the, who was it, the Will It Blend guys, you guys see that? Will It Blend, those guys, okay, that's they're not providing me any value, but they're giving me a whole lot of, they are providing value, entertainment value. They're probably a lot of, but I don't buy a blender. But
Those are expensive blenders. We interviewed, I did an interview with them for Good Food, and those are, that's not really.
That's fine.
Mine, but expensive blenders. They're like $1,000 blenders.
If you don't know them, they just do these crazy videos that were on YouTube and got viral, and tons of people watched them, and it increased their brand. Increased their brand awareness. But it was obvious that that they were trying to do that. It was the blender was in there. It was the guy who invented you know, who invented the blender. You know, it was very transparent and honest. But other people are trying to do similar things, but you know, the product is not so upfront and central to the issue.
I got one last. I like what you're saying. So I just got one more question. It was where you're talking about, you know, your identity, you know, and because all of us do a variety of things. A lot of us podcasts. Some of us are bloggers. Some of us are on MySpace, Facebook, Flickr, you name it, Twitter. You know, and they all kind of tie into what we do. But you had mentioned, you know, having your identity, but you also said that your identity isn't just your website. So, in your opinion, where is it? You know, where is your core identity? Because for me, I'm all over the place marketing my business, and I know any one of those services could drop, you know, any year or any day now, you know, or they could just drop out. So, where is your core identity, and how do you keep it with the changing?
I'm not an expert on this, but
yeah, no, just your opinion. Yeah.
My opinion is that, you know, basically it's, you know, it's however you want to do it, but it's got to be something that you own. A lot of people will do is they'll say, okay, I've got my own site, which is, you know, like for me, I have glennbennett.com, which is actually my music site, but I have glennbennett.me, which is my little personal site, you know, so I kind of am marketing myself. And then from that, I have for the podcast, I have SB Hosting, which is small business hosting, .com, and then, and so basically, glennbennett.me is my personal site. And then I kind of picture it like I own some corporations. So I say, okay, I've got SB Hosting, that's one of my corporations, and I set up this big corporate facility for that. Now, do I use Twitter? Damn yes, that's a good way to communicate with people. But, you know, Twitter is something that's here today, gone tomorrow. Up today, down tomorrow. But, you know, that's kind of, I say, okay, well, I know all these cities are out here, you know, MySpace and Facebook and all those. So I'm going to set up a little satellite store over in, especially for music. I've got one at music.myspace.com. I'm there, but it's my satellite store. And that's what I, you know, a little shop that I set up out there so that people who live on MySpace can connect to me more easily than they could through my website. So, and I have a podcast, so people who listen to podcasts can connect to me more easily than going to my site. Or people who are on, you know, the Google Reader, you know, I have a feed, and I have various feeds, and I like to be very specific. One of the things I've done with my network, I'm trying to build up a podcast, actually new media directory. So I have new media casts.com, which is kind of the gathering point where everything will come in. Anybody wants to submit a feed can submit it to there. And then, like I said, then from there, feeds will get pushed down. So if somebody tags a feed as a Ramblecast, it will get tagged on that side as a Ramblecast and then pushed down to Ramblecast.com. So people who like Ramblecast can go there. So I've got all these different corporate sites, and then I have all these, you know, different facilities that I have on various places, and all these mechanisms to feed stuff out. But like he was saying, he's got his all set up so that, you know, his feed.his corporate site.com or whatever it is, he's in control of that, no matter what services he's happened to be using today or tomorrow. So if he's got Libsyn today and, you know, Google starts offering free hosting for podcasts, boom, he's over there, you know, and he just redirects that feed, and nobody's the wiser. Nobody knows about the underlying mechanism. And that's why people are willing to jump through so many hoops to keep that corporate identity. Because you don't want to give your corporate identity to FeedBurner or MySpace. I mean, the biggest problem I see, like I tell musicians, is don't have your MySpace page as your, you know, your business cards or as your main thing. Get your own identity going, and go from there. Does that answer that question?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
And as I say, I'm not an expert at this. This is
No.
my opinion.
Yeah.
I'm a software guy.
I just wanted to speak to something that you mentioned a little while ago about a website. And I'm strictly speaking of my baseball history podcast, not the food bank one. I've never had a website. And part of it is because I I haven't wanted to take the time to learn how to do it, or I haven't wanted to spend any money to have somebody do it for me. And I'm not saying that this is the way to go. I'm just saying that you can still have a successful podcast without having a lot of stuff around it. I know that if I wanted to, I could learn how to do a website because I learned how to do a podcast. I know I could do that, but I would be taking time away from doing my podcast. So what I chose to do a long time ago was to spend the time making sure that I posted a show every week, actually. During the baseball season, I was doing 2 shows per week. And I always posted every Tuesday, every Saturday. And I put an identity to the show. I didn't change my lead-in music or, well, my whole lead-in to it. I had a format for the show, and I always stayed with that format. I don't have a voice for recording. I get criticized about my voice a lot. But, you know, the upside of it is I've been featured on iTunes quite a few times. I have a lot of listeners.
Well, and that's the other thing is, if I could just disagree with you a little bit, Bob, you do have a website and it's iTunes. Right?
Okay.
I mean, when
All
you're
right.
featured on iTunes, that is going to bring a lot of people to
Oh,
your
yeah,
show.
it
right?
does, yeah.
So that there was some sort of presence to your show and it's iTunes.
Mhm.
And so the rest you just have all the background stuff, that's working, and the hosting of the files and everything on Libsyn is working fine. But you did have something. I think if someone just starts a podcast and they're trying to get it out, you had a great, you launched a baseball history podcast right at the beginning of baseball season. It was picked up, and you got your start
I got
that
lucky.
way. Yeah, but well, no, lucky is also part of preparation. But the thing is that that's how they found you, and then you got a word of mouth thing going.
Yeah, and I'm not saying don't do all of those things. I'm just saying that it's not the only thing. You know, that putting some good content out and being consistent with your show can be just as important as all of the other things. Yeah, you do have to have some kind of a presence, but just be careful where you put your time. I chose to put my time into the show itself, and that's been successful for me. I've seen some other podcasters that have come here and gone, and they came in talking about how they're doing all these big fancy things, and they're no longer recording.